Dim the lights, settle in, and prepare yourself for stories that will haunt your dreams and send shivers down your spine. Here at Tombstone Tales, we delve into the darkest corners of the internet, unearthing chilling stories of the supernatural, the unexplained, and the downright terrifying. From shadowy figures lurking in the night to sinister secrets buried deep in forgotten history, each episode is crafted to immerse you in a world of fear and fascination. Hit that subscribe button, join our community of thrill seekers, and embark on a journey where every whisper could be a warning and every shadow a threat. Are you ready to face your fears? Then let the story time begin. Alex Morgan was always on the lookout for the next big investment. As a seasoned property developer, Alex had an eye for potential where others saw ruins. The old house at the edge of town was a prime example, a sprawling estate that had seen better days, now available for a fraction of its worth. The locals called it cursed, a place best left forgotten. But Alex saw an opportunity to turn a significant profit. The house was a Victorian-era relic, its grandeur lost to time and neglect. Windows were shattered, ivy crawled over its stone walls, and the roof sagged ominously. Yet, beneath the grime and decay, Alex envisioned a restored masterpiece that could fetch a high price on the market. The rumors of previous owners disappearing mysteriously only added to the allure. The house's haunted reputation could be spun into a selling point for the right buyers. With a team of construction workers and a plan in place, Alex wasted no time in beginning the renovation. The first few days were filled with the sounds of demolition and rebuilding, the house gradually shedding its derelict skin. Alex was there every day, overseeing the progress, making sure every detail was perfect. One afternoon, as the crew was tearing down a wall in the basement, they stumbled upon a hidden door, half buried behind layers of old plaster and wood. At first glance, it seemed like a forgotten storage space, but as they pried it open, they discovered a narrow staircase leading down into darkness. The air that wafted up was stale and cold, carrying with it a sense of foreboding that made the hairs on the back of Alex's neck stand up. Curiosity piqued, Alex decided to explore further. Armed with a flashlight and a sense of adventure, Alex descended the steps into what appeared to be a long-forgotten dungeon. The walls were lined with ancient, crumbling stone, covered in strange, occult-looking writings that seemed to pulse with a life of their own. The deeper Alex went, the stronger the feeling of unease grew, a heavy, oppressive presence that seemed to whisper in the darkness. The renovation crew stood at the top of the stairs, peering down with a mix of curiosity and apprehension. Alex waved them off, insisting it was safe, even though every instinct screamed otherwise. The dungeon was cold, the kind of cold that seeped into your bones, and the smell of damp earth and decay hung thick in the air. As Alex ventured deeper, the flashlight beam revealed more of the eerie inscriptions on the walls. Symbols and phrases in a language Alex couldn't recognize twisted and turned across the stone, creating a disturbing tapestry of malevolent intent. Despite the unnerving atmosphere, Alex pushed on, driven by the desire to uncover whatever secrets this hidden space held. Then, faintly at first, came the sound, a scratching, clawing noise that echoed through the stillness of the dungeon. Alex froze, the beam of the flashlight sweeping across the walls, but there was nothing there. The sound seemed to come from the very walls themselves, growing louder and more insistent with each passing moment. A chill ran down Alex's spine. The noise was too much. The feeling of being watched, of something lurking just out of sight, became unbearable. Turning on heel, Alex hurried back up the stairs, slamming the door shut behind them. The crew looked at Alex with a mix of confusion and concern, but Alex brushed it off, attributing the strange noises to old pipes or settling stone. That night, the images of the dungeon haunted Alex's dreams. The symbols on the walls seemed to glow, the scratching sound reverberating in the silence. Determined to get to the bottom of it, Alex called a friend, Jamie, someone with a background in history and a penchant for the occult. They agreed to come the next day and help investigate further. When morning came, Alex and Jamie stood at the entrance to the dungeon, flashlights in hand. Descending the stairs again, the feeling of unease was even stronger this time, as if the dungeon resented their intrusion. They moved deeper into the darkness, the symbols on the walls seeming to shift and writhe in the flickering light. The scratching noise began again, louder and more insistent. It echoed off the stone walls, growing closer and more frenzied with each step. Then came a loud thud, a sound so sudden and violent that it sent them both scrambling back. The noise intensified, a cacophony of terrifying sounds that seemed to come from all around them. In a panic, they ran, stumbling through the darkness until they reached a door. The door was unlike anything Alex had ever seen. It was massive, made of dark, aged wood, and covered in intricate carvings. But the most striking feature was the large, upside-down pentagon etched deeply into its surface. The sight of it sent a shiver down Alex's spine, a sense of dread settling in the pit of their stomach. Jamie reached out to touch it, but Alex grabbed their arm, stopping them. For a moment, everything went silent. The terrifying sounds that had chased them through the dungeon ceased, leaving an eerie, oppressive quiet. It was as if the very air was holding its breath. The only thing that broke the silence was the sound of their own breathing, heavy and panicked. The door was secured with a heavy iron padlock, rusted and ancient. They exchanged a look, both of them wondering if the horrors they'd experienced were real or just figments of their frightened imaginations. Deciding it was better to retreat and regroup, they made their way back up the stairs and out of the dungeon. Back in the daylight, the oppressive atmosphere seemed to lift slightly. They discussed what they had seen and heard, debating whether it was just the darkness playing tricks on their minds. But the clawing sound and the sense of malevolent presence were too real to ignore. They needed more help, and Alex knew just who to call. The next day, Alex returned with a small team from the construction crew. Each member briefed on what to expect. They carried tools and heavy-duty flashlights, ready to face whatever was down there. The crew was skeptical but curious, eager to see what lay beyond the mysterious door. As they descended into the dungeon once more, the air grew colder, and the sense of dread returned with full force. The scratching noise began almost immediately, now a familiar, unsettling presence. They reached the door with the upside-down pentagon, and Alex instructed the crew to break the padlock. It took several minutes of heavy hammering and prying, but eventually, the padlock gave way with a resounding crack. They pulled the door open, revealing a room bathed in an unnatural darkness. The beam of the flashlights barely penetrated the gloom, but they could see a large cross affixed to the inside of the door, covered in strange symbols. Suddenly, a piercing scream shattered the silence. One of the construction workers stumbled back, his flashlight clattering to the floor. In the dim light, they could see a gaunt, skeletal figure lurching forward, its eyes glowing with a malevolent hunger. The vampire, if that's what it was, moved with terrifying speed, attacking the nearest crew member with a ferocity that left Alex frozen in shock. The scene devolved into chaos as the vampire tore into the construction crew. Blood sprayed across the walls, and the air was filled with the sounds of screams and tearing flesh. Jamie grabbed Alex's arm, snapping them out of their stunned state. Together, they backed away from the carnage, the horrifying sight burning into their memories. Alex fumbled with the padlock, hands shaking as they tried to secure the door again. The vampire, sensing their movement, hurled one of the crew members' lifeless bodies towards them, knocking the door wide open. Jamie screamed, and they both turned and ran, the horrifying sounds of the vampire's feast echoing behind them as they fled through the dark, twisting corridors of the dungeon. Each step felt like an eternity, driven by sheer terror. The walls seemed to close in around them, and the oppressive presence grew stronger, making it difficult to breathe. They finally reached a narrow passageway that seemed to stretch endlessly into the darkness. The scratching noise had returned, louder and more frenzied, echoing off the stone walls. Alex and Jamie stumbled through the passage, the fear and adrenaline driving them forward. "Keep moving," Alex urged, but Jamie was lagging, the fear clearly taking its toll. Suddenly, the passage opened into a larger chamber. This room was different, larger, with ancient stone pillars supporting a vaulted ceiling. At the center stood an altar, dark and foreboding, with candles that flickered despite the absence of any breeze. The air was thick with the scent of old blood and decay, and the symbols on the walls glowed faintly in the dim light. "This can't be real," Jamie whispered, eyes wide with horror. "We have to find a way out." But before they could move, the vampire appeared at the entrance to the room, blocking their only exit. Its eyes gleamed with a sinister hunger, and a cruel smile twisted its gaunt face. It moved with an unnatural grace, stalking toward them like a predator cornering its prey. Alex's heart pounded in their chest as they scanned the room for anything they could use as a weapon. Their eyes landed on an old, rusted sword mounted on the wall. With a burst of desperate energy, Alex lunged for the sword, pulling it free just as the vampire reached them. The creature snarled, its eyes locking onto Alex. With a scream, Alex swung the sword, but the vampire was too fast. It dodged the attack effortlessly, knocking the sword from Alex's hands with a powerful swipe. Alex stumbled back, falling to the ground as the vampire loomed over them. Jamie tried to intervene, grabbing a piece of broken wood and swinging it at the vampire. The creature turned with lightning speed, grabbing the wood and tossing it aside before sinking its fangs into Jamie's neck. The scream that followed was cut short as the vampire drained the life from them, dropping the lifeless body to the ground with a sickening thud. Alex scrambled backwards, desperate to put any distance between them and the monster. The vampire turned its gaze back to Alex, blood dripping from its mouth, and slowly began to advance. The oppressive presence in the room grew stronger, making it hard to breathe, hard to think. In a final, desperate act, Alex grabbed a candlestick from the altar, brandishing it like a weapon. The vampire laughed, a chilling, hollow sound that echoed off the stone walls. "Your struggles are futile," it hissed, its voice a guttural whisper. "This place is my domain, and you are nothing but prey." Alex's mind raced, trying to think of anything that could save them. The vampire lunged, and in a moment of sheer instinct, Alex swung the candlestick, striking the vampire across the face. The creature recoiled, hissing in pain, giving Alex a momentary advantage. Without thinking, Alex grabbed one of the lit candles and thrust it into the vampire's face. The creature screamed, a high-pitched wail that shook the very foundations of the dungeon. It stumbled back, clawing at its face as the flame seared its flesh. Seizing the opportunity, Alex dashed past the vampire, sprinting towards the exit. But just as they reached the doorway, a powerful force yanked them back, sending them sprawling to the ground. The vampire, though wounded, was far from defeated. It moved with renewed fury, its eyes blazing with rage. Alex tried to crawl away, but the vampire was upon them in an instant, its claws digging into their shoulders. The pain was excruciating, and Alex screamed as the vampire lifted them off the ground, slamming them against the wall. "You cannot escape me," it growled, its breath hot and foul against Alex's face. "You will die here, and your flesh will give me strength." The vampire's fangs descended, but instead of just biting Alex, it opened its mouth wide and bit deeply into Alex's shoulder, tearing away a chunk of flesh. The agony was unbearable, and Alex's vision swam with the pain. The vampire chewed methodically, its eyes never leaving Alex's, savoring the fear as much as the flesh. With horrifying precision, the vampire continued its gruesome feast, ripping and tearing into Alex's body. Each bite was slow and deliberate, designed to prolong the suffering. Alex's screams echoed through the chamber, blending with the sounds of ripping flesh and the vampire's low growls of satisfaction. Alex's strength ebbed away with each bite, the life draining from them as the vampire devoured them piece by piece. The pain was unrelenting, a constant wave that threatened to drown Alex in darkness. The world began to fade, the edges of vision darkening as consciousness slipped away. The last thing Alex saw was the vampire's eyes, glowing with a malevolent hunger, before everything went black. The silence in the dungeon was deafening after the final screams faded. The vampire stood over Alex's lifeless body, blood dripping from its fangs and bits of flesh clinging to its mouth. The oppressive presence in the room lifted slightly, but the air was still thick with malevolence. The vampire, now sated and stronger than before, moved through the dark corridors of the dungeon with renewed energy. The ancient symbols on the walls seemed to pulse with dark power, reflecting the creature's heightened strength. The altar room, now empty save for the bodies of Alex and Jamie, became a place of dark rituals, a feeding ground for the vampire's insatiable hunger. Days turned into weeks, and the town above remained blissfully unaware of the horrors that lurked beneath the old house. The disappearance of Alex, Jamie, and the construction crew became yet another unsolved mystery, adding to the house's haunted legend. The townsfolk whispered of curses and dark forces, but none dared to venture near the property. Meanwhile, the vampire continued to thrive, using the hidden dungeon as its lair. It ventured out at night, seeking new victims to sustain its unholy existence. The old house, now abandoned and decaying further, stood as a silent sentinel to the darkness within. The property, once seen as a potential goldmine by Alex, became a forgotten relic, its secrets buried deep beneath layers of fear and superstition. Nature began to reclaim the house, ivy creeping up the walls, and the roof caving in further with each passing storm. The dungeon, however, remained untouched, its dark secrets guarded by the malevolent presence that dwelled within. The vampire, ever patient, waited for the next curious soul to stumble upon its lair. It knew that, eventually, someone would come, drawn by the allure of the old house and its hidden mysteries. And when they did, the cycle of horror would begin anew, the dungeon once again echoing with the screams of the damned. The old house would remain, a beacon of darkness and death, a reminder of the horrors that lie hidden beneath even the most innocent facade. The legend of the cursed property would continue to grow, fueled by the whispers of the townsfolk and the disappearances of those who dared to venture too close. In the end, the vampire's hunger was eternal, its thirst for blood and flesh unquenchable. The dungeon beneath the old house would forever be its domain, a place of unspeakable terror and unending darkness, waiting for the next victim to succumb to its ancient, malevolent power.